everyone. I'm Mark Nepo, and I'd like to thank the Unity Church of New York on 58th Street. We were supposed to have a publication reading event for my new book, The Book of Soul, which is just coming out this week and in May 5th. But of course, we can't be together. We're thinking of all of you in New York. And the folks at Unity asked if I might share some of what I would have been sharing with you that night through a video. So I'm happy to give you a sense of it, some part of this reading that we were going to do. And so I want to start with, I have a theme. The theme is called Helping Each Other Stay Awake, which is one of the sections of the new book. And let's start with a quote from the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, from him later in life. It was an unusual quote for him and very moving, and I think relevant to our times. He said, "I want to learn more and more to see what is necessary as beautiful, so I can be one of those who makes things beautiful." I think of that now as I wash my hands countless times a day. How can I turn that into a ritual instead of an annoyance, into something sacred? So I want to start with a piece from the new book called Our True Inheritance, which speaks about being a spiritual warrior. When we speak of being a spiritual warrior, which is a concept referred to in many traditions, we're describing a journey of transformation that is steadfast in its adherence to both love and truth. And it's interesting that the word war traces back to the Indo-European root word wers, W-E-R-S, and that word means to confuse, to mix up. Now, war and the inevitable conflict it produces within us and between us always stems from a state of confusion. And so a spiritual warrior is one devoted to the clearing of confusion, both within us and around us. The word veteran refers to anyone who's had a long experience or practice. It traces back to another Indo-European word, wet, W-E-T, which means to inspire or engage. So these origin points, to a relational call to carry all of our beasts of burden while staying engaged in spirit until we can clear confusion and establish roots. This is our true inheritance. This is the work of a spiritual warrior, a veteran of life, not just individually, but in community. This work is indispensable and elusive and impossible to do alone. And we need to be clearing confusion now. Few things are more worthwhile to pursue. You know, as I think about New York, and I was born in Brooklyn, and I go back to my grandmother on my father's side, Grandma Minnie, who was a Russian immigrant in the early 1900s, and she was more of a mother to me than my own mother. And this is a foundational memory, a piece that I return to find solidarity from time to time. It's called On the Way to Coney Island. I was 8 or 9 rummaging through her basement, through my dead grandfather's books, when she appeared at the foot of the old see-through stairs, nostalgic and moved that I was searching through his things. There were no windows, and the only light came flooding down the length of stairs over her massive shoulders, giving a sheen to her matted gray hair. When I turned, she seemed an immigrant deity. I ran to her with this relic, so worn that the cover was indented with a palm print, the edges crumbling like petrified wood. The book seemed very mysterious. The letters weren't in English, but in strange, beautiful configurations. She almost cried and sat on the bottom step. I snuggled between her legs against her apron. She gathered me in as she opened the relic and said, "This was your grandfather's Talmud. He brought it from Russia." I remember running my little hands all over it, the way I do large stones. Her hands were huge and worked like movable stones themselves. She turned me by my shoulders, and with the light flooding my face, she whispered more firmly than I had ever heard anyone whisper. She said, "You are why I came to this country." She took me by the chin. "You are why I live." She put the relic in my small hands, but I was tentative. She gripped me to it firmly, and my small palm slid into the well of my grandfather's touch. She stood on the bottom step, blocking the light, and said, "I love you like life itself." She reached down and sandwiched my little fingers and said, "These are the oldest things you own." As she waddled up the stairs, the light wavered on and off my face. Without turning, she went back to her kitchen, and I stood in the light, settled in the impression of Nehemiah's grip, a man I never knew. And I didn't want to leave this dingy threshold. I was afraid to climb back into the light. I stood before those stairs, a grimy little innocent, and felt like an orphan who'd been told I was a prince to a kingdom that had perished before I was born. I leafed through the strange letters, watching the light make glitter of the dust. I put the book behind a secret shelf, afraid it would crumble if brought into the world, and walked the lighted stairs, taller than I had descended. I entered her kitchen, older yet still a child, and climbed her lap like a throne. You know, we all have these foundational stories, if we can remember them. They're part of our personal mythology, and they help us be reminded who we are without other people's opinions, without other people's expectations. This next poem is, I'm 69, but this poem I wrote when I turned 50, which is hard to believe. That's almost 20 years ago. It's called "Crossing Some Ocean in Myself." Half a century, and finally what I feel is what I say, and what I say is what I mean. What I mean is that others, so used to my gargantuan efforts to be good, don't understand my efforts to be real. They find me coming up short. I'm simply burning old masks, and the next step takes me, I don't know where. As it should be, I don't know, just that I love who I love. I listen with my heart. I struggle with the reflexes of my mind. I mean, the pains of life are sharper now, but disappear more clearly the way knives are swallowed by the sea. And the subtleties of being come on like waves that cleanse, but which, when dry, I can't seem to find. So much like a gentle animal now, unsure what I was fighting for, except to breathe and sing, except to call out the human names for God that others have uttered when hurt and confused. So much like a love animal now, until the end of any day's work is the soft moment when loving and being loved are the same. And all year round the birds and trees instruct, make visible the wind, the way reaching without shame makes visible the love. You know, I retrieve these expressions. It's not like I say, oh, well, this would be a neat place to end. I follow the truth of a feeling, a question, a confusion, a wonder, and they lead me, if I'm true enough, to an insight. Like all of a sudden, the trees and birds instruct. Well, where did that come from? Well, you can only see the wind by what stands open to it. And likewise, if we can be authentic, Spirit is shown through us. This next piece is a story. And sometimes we just record the stories of others that we find that are holy. And this was from a man, Eric, who He's a TV producer from Montreal, and we were at a conference together, both speaking, and it was one of those things where we just fell into each other immediately, like we'd known each other forever. And on the third day of the conference, we were having coffee, and Eric shared with me, he said, I wasn't always this full of light. I was actually dark when I was a young man. And so he gave me permission to record his story. This is called Depth Seeks Us. We met in the mountains far from the sea, but in his eyes I saw the sea. Somehow we'd known each other for a long time. He was born and raised in Montreal, and his English, cupped in French, lapped like small waves in the air between us. On the third day he said, I don't tell this very often, but I was not very happy as a young man. I worried about the world and if all that mattered would make it through. He looked younger than he was. He folded his napkin and continued. I was annoyed by everything, never sure if those who put things together could outlast those who break things apart. And it made me somewhat dark. He leaned back and continued. Everyone thought I was too critical, but we were all trained in the mind at an early age. Anyway, I was 21, half interested in everything, on a harbor ship full of tourists, annoyed at their eagerness. The clouds were thick and the sea was choppy, and suddenly a school of belugas circled the stern, and everyone went running. I saw their soft whale heads round through the surface and return, and thought, how disappointing this is all we get to see. He sighed and shook his head a bit and said, I wandered to the bow to get away from everyone and leaned over the rail. The ship bounced into the waves, bits of spray on my face. It felt good to be left alone. And then, from under the bow, a mountain of a fish lifted the ship. It was a great blue whale peeling back the sea. And there, right before me, its gigantic eyes staring into mine, an eye as wide as peace, as deep as all time. It stared through the bottom of my heart. I tell you, that moment, eye to eye, felt like a lifetime, and in that brief lifetime, everything was aglow. I can see it all now, the water streaming from its godlike eye, and before it swept back into the sea, it took all my doubt with it. Everything seemed softer and truer. By now his eyes had widened in the telling, and we were drifting into each other even more. He took my hand and said, I was born in the eye of the whale. So for Eric, it was quite a dramatic moment that opened him to the depth of his being and his connection to all life, but it may not be as dramatic for us. It could be simply seeing light fall on a tree or watching a bird nibble on seed on a rainy day. But each of us, where is your whale? Be open to where it will be, what will open you and bring you below all doubt. This next piece is from the new book. It's called The Agents of Kindness. The Agents of Kindness. It's the silken threads of care woven through the brutal storms of time that hold everything together. A loved one's picture carried through a war and delivered to a grandchild 30 years later. The seed that isn't washed away, that takes root, arriving in the world as an orchid whose beauty makes a young girl become a painter. The memory of the moment we met 25 years ago, overwhelming me as I watch you sleep this morning. The laughter of my father while planing a piece of mahogany, which kept me believing in the love of work and the work of love while going through cancer. These silken threads are everywhere, a web of barely visible connections that infuse us with resilience when forced or loved to find our way through what we're given. In the midst of great turmoil, in the cascade of human catastrophes, these threads of care seem obsolete, artifacts of a gentler time, but they wait under all the breakage that overcomes us. These fine threads of care can be lost but never broken. They wait for the devotion of a single soul, daring to stand up for life in the midst of cruelty, daring to love everyone in the face of prejudice, daring to step out of the drama that says we're strangers or enemies, daring to help those in hiding come out into the open. One silken thread of care held onto and followed, sometimes for years, can repair the entire world. It was my grandmother, yes, my same grandmother, who taught me to be kind, who, with the weary faith of a sturdy immigrant, taught me that life opens for those who dare to give. Once living in the open, there is no career but being kind. So let's keep each other company, which means let's be companions, which goes back to the French word meaning one who breaks bread with another. Isn't that beautiful? One who breaks bread with another. It always comes down to this: our willingness to walk together through the storm and share what we have, so we can create a path to all that matters. It's very challenging in these very difficult times. It reminds me very much of my journey through cancer, when everything extraneous was worn away, and I think in this pandemic we are being forced to be still and let everything that doesn't matter fall away. This is a recent piece, a reflection, a journal entry from this pandemic time called "We Will Never Be the Same." The sun is beautiful today while people are dying all around the world like spores on the wind. It cracks my heart to hold the truth of these realities at once. And the apex, as they call it, won't arrive for 14 to 21 days. As if someone has sighted a tsunami that we can't yet see, and we are waiting for it to crash over our lives. Still, the late sun lines the thin poplar outside my window with such a delicacy of yellow. It seems to say that light will outlast all pestilence. Of little comfort to those who can't breathe, or to those who race their loved ones to emergency rooms, never to see them again. Throughout history, life and death, throughout history, life and death have happened side by side, but never have we been so aware of both at the same time. It rips my heart. A soft chickadee is eating seed outside my window, its black and white mask so vibrant as if God just brushed his pastels on the canvas of this moment. This, while ventilators are being split with makeshift hoses to pump air into the lungs of two people at once. Still, the silent beauty of this late light is relentlessly affirming. It has always been this way, even when I was close to death myself from cancer over 30 years ago. It reminds me piercingly of my dear friend Noor, who was dying in 1991. I had just seen her the day before. Then, on a sunlit wonder of a day like today, there was a call and she was gone. I fell to the floor, and the light was mercilessly beautiful, saying without saying, "Though you are being dragged into the underworld by your love of the one now gone, the light will pause for no one. So cry, but lift your head when you're done." All of life so muscular, resilient, and intensely fragile. How can we go on? How can we not? I am both heartened and humbled now as then. It makes me bow to the forces of life while searching for solid ground. We will never be the same. As almost dying from cancer in my 30s scoured my lens of perception, changing me forever, this pandemic is doing the same to humanity collectively. The question is whether enough of us will grow from it. How much of the quiet will we retain? How much of what matters will we honor in the new normal? Will the humility revealed in all this suffering be foremost in our receiving of each other? Or will our arrogance grow back like moss on a rock? So, these are very telling and poignant and raw times. Here's a poem that recently came. I wake up once in a while with these. Carl Jung said that we are, all of us, lightning rods for the unconscious. When we are authentically ourselves, then other life comes through us as well. So this is a poem that came to me recently called In Those Moments. Sometimes after she falls and before she gets up, she takes a deep breath. And in those moments, she stares briefly into the center of things. It calms her. For in those moments, she drinks from something older than her life. Other times, the same thing happens when reading a passage from a book that opens her heart, or when hearing that lift in a song that makes her think of looking at the stars as a little girl. She never knows how to speak of these openings. It's as if the still point of her life rests on the bottom of all trouble like a weighted pearl, and an invisible string ties it to her heart. And every once in a while the pearl of life tugs at her heart, forcing her to fall and remember that there is nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. We are being forced into a global Sabbath. Sabbath is the one day we don't turn one thing into another. And we have been forced globally to stop turning things into another, to stop feeling urgent and rushed and raced, as if life is other than where we are. This is a poem called The Myth of Urgency. Everyone wants you to quietly be Atlas, to shoulder it all. Even the voice in your head insists you are behind. But I've seen the light in you, the one the gods finger while we sleep. I've seen the blossom open in your heart, no matter what remains to be done. There are never enough hours to satisfy the minions of want. So close your eyes and lean into the oneness that asks nothing of you. When the calls stack answer to no one, though you receive them all, just open your beautiful hands, born with nothing in them. You have never been more complete than in this incomplete moment. So we are always challenged to pick up and put down, to listen to others, to not listen to others, to be influenced, to be not influenced. It is a never-ending practice. And here is a poem called Thinking Like a Butterfly. Monday, I was told I was good. I felt relieved. Tuesday, I was ignored. I felt invisible. Wednesday, I was snapped at. I began to doubt myself. On Thursday, I was rejected. Now I was afraid. On Saturday, I was thanked for being me, and my soul relaxed. On Sunday, I was left alone, till the part of me that can't be influenced grew tired of submitting and resisting. Monday, I was told I was good. By Tuesday, I got off the wheel. So, of course, did I really get off the wheel on Tuesday? No, of course not, because I'm human. So why did I end the poem there? Because all of art, and especially poetry, I believe one of its great purposes is to marry what is with what can be. And so I needed to end the poem there so I have something to aspire to. Something to aspire to. By Tuesday, I got off the wheel. I hope, I pray, someday. This poem is called At the Window. I was at the window when a fly near the latch was on its back spinning, legs furious, going nowhere. I thought to swat it, but something in its struggle was too much my own. It kept spinning and began to tire, and without moving closer, I exhaled steadily, my breath a sudden wind, and the fly found its legs, rubbed its face, and flew away. I continued to stare at the latch, hoping that someday the breath of something incomprehensible would right me and enable me to fly. So here's another story poem, one through which life other than my own has come through. It's called The Symmetry of Kindness. The train slammed into the station, injuring hundreds. The engineer was critically hurt. People toppled over each other, bouncing across seats and against windows. There was blood and glass everywhere. One woman shimmied her way to the platform when part of the station ceiling fell, pinning her. She thought she would die. Then the hands of fellow passengers lifted her one to another, and she was saved. Later she wanted to say thank you, but didn't know who to thank. Once on the mend, she retrieved a list of those who were with her that day. Now, one by one, she looks them up, asking if they had helped there. Each of them smiles and says no. Once with them, she can see what each needs, and so she helps them along. She unpacks groceries for an old woman, listens to a widower's story, and gives a single mom her umbrella. This has gone on for weeks. She keeps trying to find those who helped her, only to help those she finds. Finally, it occurs to her, this is God's symmetry of kindness. She will never know who helped her, so she can thank and help everyone she meets along the way. And I think in these very trying times, we are being asked to do the same thing. We will never know who helps us, so we can thank and help everyone along the way. A few more to share. This is a small poem. I'll read it twice, called Inside Everything. Keep trying to hide, and in time, you become a wall. Keep trying to love, and in time, you become love. Our journey on earth is to stop hiding so we can become love. Everything else is a seduction and a distraction. Courage is staying true. Inside everything. Keep trying to hide, and in time you become a wall. Keep trying to love, and in time you become love. Our journey on earth is to stop hiding so we can become love. Everything else is a seduction and a distraction. Courage is staying true. This is a piece that speaks to our time, my wife and I, our time in New York City. Our heart goes out to everyone in New York City. We so love New York City and miss being there. And it also makes reference to the Hindu deity Ganesh, or Ganesha, who is the provider and remover of obstacles, because obstacles are teachers. And I refer to a store, and it's actually one in the Village, on McDougal Street, right across from Cafe Reggio. I've been in there many times. But here, for all of our friends in New York City, becoming a small gesture. Maybe all my sufferings have been carving me into a statue of Ganesh that someone will find in the next life in a small store in New York when they rush in to get out of the rain. Maybe all I've been through will draw them to pick me up and touch my long trunk or one of my 4 giving hands. And though they can't afford to take me home, they might circle the store 3 times before putting me on their credit card, because something in the way life has carved my eyes shut speaks to the unawakened song they carry that they so desperately want to sing. Maybe they'll take me home and place me on their nightstand where I can bless them as they dream of being who they are. So one of the things, I have just two more pieces here. One of the things that the new book, the Book of Soul, is really about is that how we through our life of experience go through a second labor here on earth. The first, of course, is we're brought into the world through the labor our mothers go through. But through that labor of a lifetime, the soul is birthed on earth. And the reward for that is that the temple becomes the world. Yes, we gather in mosques and temples and churches and sanghas and holy relationships and go to places in nature. But I believe that's an apprenticeship so that all the walls fall down. There are no walls. The temple is the world. You know, I want to leave on this one a quote from Buddha, who said, "Thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened." So there is no end to what we can give. And I have found that when I have been asked to give the most, when I feel like I don't have anything left to give, that's when something deep actually comes from me. And so I wish this journey of the temple becoming the world, of this second labor for you, and I hope that everything in the world will speak to you, rivers, mountains, the city, the forest. And I wish you many teachers who will bring you to yourself. And in truth, I've run out of ways to describe this endless journey. Only know this, that in place of wings, God gave us love. So I want to close with one poem, but I do want to share with you that the new book, the Book of Soul from St. Martin's Essentials, is out this week and available everywhere. And I also want to announce that in June, I'll be offering a 3-session webinar, which you can register. You can go to my website or anywhere. You can register for it at www.live.marknepo.com. And that will be centered on the one life we're given, saying yes to life, offered on 3 successive Mondays in June. Oh, I hope you're well and safe. And thank you for spending this time together. Again, many thanks to Unity of New York City. I hope we can to be together someday in the future. And I want to close with this poem of mine, Free Fall. If you have 1 hour of air and many hours to go, you must breathe slowly. If you have 1 arm's length and many things to care for, you must give freely. If you have 1 chance to know God and many doubts, you must set your heart afire. We are blessed. Each day is a chance. We have 2 arms. Fear wastes air. Many blessings to all of you.